There we go. Hey,
Hey.
I'm Sean. This is Brett. Thanks for hanging out. I wanted to pull up the impetus for this conversation. I wanted to find the date, March 6th, 2018,
Ooh.
was the inaugural episode of the Colonel Sean podcast.
Mm.
And I recorded with a buddy of mine, John Dittmer, who is a photographer that I used to use a ton, but he has this pesky full-time job, and now he's got these kids, and it's a whole big thing. But John at the time was a manager at California Pizza Kitchen.
Mm.
Great benefits, great hours, that he had been there for years. And he was always jealous of me of like, man, but you just get to like make videos for a living. Like that's
Yeah.
like you get to take photos and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I don't make money at the pace that you do. I don't have the benefits that you do. There are some drawbacks to what I do and how I do it. And so the first podcast was creation as a profession versus creation as a passion. And I feel like I've met a lot of
Mm.
people who fit in one of those two camps, but there's this third category sort of in between those two of a creative professional, an employee at a creative agency in certain roles. And I think there's people like at agencies who are like account managers and stuff who maybe it's mostly emails and spreadsheets and they're not getting to put their thumbprint on projects.
Yeah.
But then there's people like yourself. And so I thought you, as an introduce yourself, Brett. Who are you? Why are you here on my YouTube channel?
My name is Bret Hoy. I'm a filmmaker. I think that's probably why I ended up here because that's how we met. On the in the course of a shoot, I think it was a commercial that we were shooting, or it was a fundraising video that we were shooting.
As a Kickstarter.
Um, exactly. And so we kind of met that way. But I also think that it would be a little bit foolish to say that I'm just a filmmaker. I think that most people know me as someone who likes to do a variety of things. I don't like to do just one thing. And film has always kind of been like the central thing that I've gone towards. But I enjoy cooking. I've worked in restaurants and stuff like that. And I enjoy painting. I enjoy writing. I've written for a few different outlets, and I've been published a couple different times. So I like I like to do a variety of things. Variety of things.
I think what makes you unique, I know other people who are creative artists like yourself. I don't know anyone who is as thoughtful as you
Oh
with
wow.
regard to all these different things. And the way that you're not just like, hey, I'm going to throw some paint on a canvas and, see if I can make a cool looking face. Like you approach something, you examine the medium, you examine what other people do with it. And you do that with video, with food, with anything that you touch. You seem to do it in a way that is very not just analytical but thoughtful. Like it comes from a good place.
Well, thank you. Yes.
And so recently you took a job. I don't know
Hmm.
if you want to define recently, but
Yeah, it's almost been a year now.
yeah.
But yeah, I actually took a full-time job, and I should have introduced myself with that as well. I think that's actually part of the conversation here.
Yeah, that's
Um,
sort of the main part of the conversation that I want
yeah,
to.
yeah. And then I'm a full-time editor, full-time for an agency, so Vidzu here in St. Louis. And
I've
we
done
do
work with them.
a wide variety of things. And Vidzu is a part of the Nitrous Effect, which is a collection of companies that does a lot of like live event stuff. But really, the big deal for me, and we can get into this in our conversation, one of the things for me was going to a full-time place. Where do you want to go? What kind of stuff do you want to do? And I think there's two different kind of ways you can go about it. You can go to a place where there's the exact creative work that you want to be doing, or you can go to a place that has the resources to really do the kind of stuff that you want to do. And I think that, again, we can get into that, but that's kind of been the choice that I've made, is how to split up what I want to do and how do I want to grow. And that was the choice that kind of led me to a place where I was like, I want to take a full-time position and start to try to actually use what I can do to grow this place.
That's interesting. So as I over the years, December was 13 years of running Boom Reactive,
Mm.
and throughout that time, especially in the last like 6 years that I've been focused solely on video, I've had conversations with agencies and people that I've met at agencies who are like, hey, we're hiring editors, we're hiring producers. Do you want a job? And they've thrown salaries at me and they're like, we're hiring at, insert number here, tempting numbers. And I've always said no, because to me, the flexibility of what I do and being able to travel and do whatever and work my life around whatever has been a priority. And then even more so now that I have a kid, the thought of being gone from 9 to 5 or just busy every day does not appeal to me currently. Why you haven't, this is your first full-time agency job, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decline until now? Why were you not a full-time employee somewhere until now?
Well, I think there's a little bit of context. Well, I say a little bit of context. It's the entire world's context. The world changed, obviously, with the pandemic. And I think that the way that I thought about, what I was trying to do with my creative life really changed. I had gone through a time in 2020 when I got incredibly burned out with client work. And I think it's relevant to discuss here, client work that pushed me in a way where I didn't feel like there was care about me as a person. You know what I'm saying? And I think that a lot of, creative contractors, just contractors in general, felt that way in 2020. But I kind of had that realization. And so I was like, okay, so I know what value I can provide anywhere. I can do a lot of amazing things. I feel like I've done a lot of amazing things in my past. But I was like, what do I really want to do? And I felt like the thing that I had really been missing in my past was growing something, taking something and having like kind of like a beginning and an end. Or not a beginning and end, but you know what I mean? Like a before after, something where I've really been able to take something from a smaller place and grow it out. And, I think that that's kind of like was really like the reason why I wanted to go to a full-time place. And then what added on top of that, what stacked on top of that was that, I've become more comfortable being at home. And so I've had my own routines with, creativity and what I do. And so I kind of found, that there's like time that I feel like I can actually dedicate to this. I think that, within all of that is my general kind of belief that, my job is like every single other job. And I truly, truly mean that. I think another thing about the pandemic experience has been that people have realized that regardless of what you do, it's susceptible to burnout. It doesn't matter. And I think that there's a real temptation, and you were talking about, grass is always greener. There's a real temptation to think that stress weighs differently, like, oh, if I just had this. And, at the end of the day, we're all just in the moment dealing with what is in front of us. And we have to pick our battles. And specifically, I can get into actually some of the stuff that I've been working on with Vidzu and, the reason why I went there. Just now really getting into that where I can flex what I think that we have there. And I mean, I should just say it right now, really, the thing for me, I had different opportunities in terms of places that I could go, in terms of agencies, if I was going to go full time, if I wanted to stay on the job market and do those kind of things. But one of the major benefits that Vidzu offered, among other things, obviously, is the size of their network, their business network. And you can think of that in a lot of different ways. I think a lot of people during the pandemic think about that as stability, but that's not really what I was thinking about. There's a project we're working on right now that is the Washington Park Cemetery. So this is a cemetery with 42,000 plots in North City. And this is a client with zero money. This is a mother and son. And we've taken this on. But what we can do now and what we're doing and what I'm able to do in my position here is use the nitrous effect and Vidzu's client base to then motivate action, in this case, preservation of a cemetery. So what we're doing, and I don't want to, put the cart before the horse, but their local university, let's just say that they're doing a conference on women in the business community. And we have African-American women that are interned in this cemetery that we're basically doing, we're figuring out kind of like a sponsorship thing between the university and this. So these are opportunities that would exist in the ether, but the conversations wouldn't be happening if you didn't have this organization that had the kind of weight to, like actually set it up, in the sense of, you know, this university would talk to us because we've worked with them for a long time, and because we have, so many employees, we've done their events, we've done their blank and blank. So you kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that angle. I was approaching this, I guess, very selfishly with regard to like, okay, you're at this agency and you're an editor, so you're gonna edit videos for them, but the stuff that you want to create, the fun stuff, like you
Yeah.
don't have control necessarily over what clients people are going after, what clients are coming in,
Hmm.
what verticals of industries, etc. And is that fulfilling? And I hadn't paused to think that just with the added people, the larger
Yeah.
size comes more connections, more history than any one person can have, and that opens up these doors to connection. And it's funny you mention a video for a cemetery,
Hmm.
because my very first video I ever did is I was testing my Sony Z5U mini
Wow.
DV camcorder, my first boom reactive purchase. There was I think it's Greenview or Green Greenberg, Green something.
Greenwood Cemetery.
Greenwood Cemetery.
Okay, so you can continue with your story, but there's a slight connection here. I mean, small connection, but
Yeah. And I went out and did this documentary and just sort of was figuring out how to use my camera and stuff as they were taking the cemetery and trying to, like, not even acre by acre, but in much smaller chunks than that,
yeah.
reclaim it. This was overgrown, like full trees had grown through
So
headstones and stuff. And
very similar issues in Washington Park Cemetery. The term that I actually use is desecrated, because it's just disrespected. It's property that's owned by people who have the money to do something about it, or at least, they could do something, and they aren't. And so that's kind of, what we're trying to do. And I mean, really, when I talk about like the weight of the organization, the hard part about that is that you really don't know. If you're trying to grow something, you can't really rely on objective, points. You can't be like, well, I want to make this much, or I want to do this.
mhm.
But some, recently, and I don't want to go into detail, because I feel like I'd be outing people, but in just conversations with clients that we've had, I've been able to, multiple times bring up, this project, and be able to connect these things. And, what's really interesting is, I come to it from my angle, where I'm like, I want to, do this. I want to connect these people to save the cemetery, to, do this back. But these people come to it from this end of, they want to do good business. And I think in 2022, 2021, well, oh my God, I reversed that. But either way, in the times we are now, people understand that, and they understand the business value of those things as well. So who knows what that is down the line. But if we're thinking about, what can we do with the smallest amount of, like, we just have a documentary crew show up to a cemetery, but now we have the weight of this organization where we have connections all through St. Louis.
A tiny example that you just reminded me of. I was filming something with the St. Louis Symphony, and we were working with these two directors out of Chicago, husband and wife that were fantastic. They've become great friends. And before we were great friends, I was filming something for another client, Safe Connections here in St. Louis, an organization that
Yeah.
does domestic violence and
Yeah.
sexual abuse prevention and crisis intervention.
I know about this. I have to say, I have to sing your praises. I know about this because of the Hardy and Sons episode, where you talked about bringing this up with the jury pool, right? And that there was a conversation that eventually led to
Yeah,
a connection there.
talking to the circuit clerk and a judge that, yeah. So it's all
Yeah.
about the network. But I had this person, one of their clients of this organization, who is now involved with working with children who are victims, and like has this beautiful story of how she's you don't say they healed, but how she's worked through some of that and
Yeah.
is using that to help others. But we didn't have a place to film it. She had this tiny apartment in Chicago, and I brought it up at the end of a call that I was having with the symphony. And the two people in Chicago, one of them was like, I work at a theater. Let me see if you could use our theater.
Yeah.
And they had this awesome black box theater. And we got to film there. And it's one of my favorite things. I mean, selfishly, it was a black box theater, so I got to control all the light and
Yeah,
make
it's
it.
like I
It just
love
looked
shooting a black
beautiful to me. I
box.
wasn't fighting any of the elements,
Yeah.
but it was just because I happened to know the two people, one person who
Mhm.
had a connection to a theater in Chicago and one person who needed a space to film in Chicago. And what I forget is that with any larger organization than myself, it's not just the two people I know in Chicago, it's the three people that each of 10 people know in Chicago. And it just has that much more impact where, yeah, business and
Yeah.
growth and networking is one thing, but your ability to make an impact with something that resonates with you is a big part of having access to that network.
I think the most important thing that I've learned in my business life is that I'm a shitty businessman. I'm sorry. It's just true. I'm bad at it. Like I don't want to deal with it because I am bad at it, and that's created other issues. And so what I kind of had to do is be like, all right, what do I want to handle? You know what I'm saying? What are the
Hmm.
stresses that I want to handle? And I think that one of those things is, that's just a huge part of life is figuring out what it is. I mean, again, like I said earlier, every industry is susceptible to burnout, and some more than others, but every industry is. And I think that if you go into that, I don't want to be too cynical, but when you go into it thinking that way, you start to realize that, like, I'm not going to put all of my chips, in terms of, fulfillment into this one basket, because this basket has to provide me money.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
And
there's,
that's exactly what sparked this whole thing to me. So, um, I know that you're a busy enough man to not comb through my YouTube channel. But right now, like my past several videos have been about this book
oh,
called
gotcha.
Clockwork by Mike
Yeah, yeah.
Michalowicz. Design your business to run itself. And I'm having this existential crisis with looking at my creative business and like this concept of an entrepreneur that grows their business to the point where you can sell it, or like, you don't have to
Yeah.
work anymore. That doesn't appeal to me. I want to do the work. I like editing. I
Hmm.
like filming. The last thing I want is to take all of my responsibilities, hire people to do them. Yes, it would be efficient. Yes, I could sip margaritas on a beach. I don't like margaritas. Yes, I could. Yes, I could sip Baja Blast on a beach.
Oh yeah, there we
But
go.
I give up what I want to do. But on the other side of that, if I forever hold on to me being the sole person who can direct and edit, which is a lot of what us solopreneur video
Yeah.
people do, it's the situation like you're saying. Like if I get sick, if I have like when I took paternity leave, like people are like, oh, that's so great. You can just take 3 months off. I'm like, yeah, I can take a year off. I can take any amount of time off, but however long I take off, I earn no money and I
Yeah.
lose momentum. And so trying to find
Yeah.
this sweet spot of where do I grow to? What does this look like? How does it become more sustainable? That's what caused me to reach out to you, because I wanted to say, like,
Yeah.
you've had your own creative things and you still do stuff beyond your
Yeah.
agency work,
Oh yeah.
but you've also made the decision to get into agency work. And I think my initial defense mechanism is like, well, Brett sold out.
Well,
Brett
hey.
sold out. But it's not true. There's so much more to it than that. But I think that's something that kicks in me.
So I gotta say, I mean, okay, so I was actually doing this was one of the big parts of, I feel like, just my origin story in general is I have very cynical beliefs about work, but it actually happened before I even got to work, and I'm not. I say that because, and in not a cynical way. I say that because I was actually in college shooting a documentary on punk rock. Okay, and there's a guy who runs a art center, a neighborhood art center that is purely donations, contributions, people, giving, it's a very, very tough business. And he's in his, 60s, and he's somebody who is driven purely by the passion. And one of the things that I was, really compelled by with him was not necessarily him being like, oh, do what I did. He was telling you, like, find out how you're going to make your money and find out how you're going to do what you're going to do. You know what I'm saying? And the real important things, the best things, the things you'll be most proud of in a lot of ways are the things that earn you the money and do the things that you want to do. So I think that the question that you have to ask yourself is, where are you? What do you want to do? And be honest. In my mind, and I've told you this, I wouldn't be satisfied unless I was doing something where I felt like, at the end of the day, I was, making rich people pay their due. So I basically, like that really is part of what it drives me, is I want to connect the people who have the resources to the people that don't. So how do you do that? Well, you got to be in touch with the people who have resources.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, again, it's just pick your battles, choose what you're going to do. And, at the end of the day, I think one of the things that is so unspoken about this story is that I'm incredibly privileged. I've had like so many amazing kind of like leg ups, to the point to where I can, do that, choose to focus purely on like, what do I want to do, and not necessarily how much do I want to make, because again, I understand the luxury of that conversation. But again, thinking about things in terms of the resources of the organization that you're with, and not necessarily what you're siphoning from that.
Well, my last question for you is, knowing everything that you know, how old are you now?
I'm 30. I just turned 30.
Happy birthday. When was your birthday? Did I miss your birthday? I missed your birthday.
My birthday was Christmas. So December 25th. Yes.
Happy birthday, Bret. And
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas. As a 30-year-old with your sage wisdom, I'm 37, and so I know so much more than you.
You're sager
so much
than
smarter
me.
than you. Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Sagier. Sagier.
I'm the sagiest person here. But given your experience as a professional artist, a professional creative, and you're working for yourself and for someone else, to someone who is maybe graduating college or finishing high school and has a passion for art, be it video or graphic design, any of the traditional arts and things like that, what would you tell to somebody who is looking to do what they do with regard to these creative arts in a way that might sustain them creatively and financially for the rest of their life? Tiny question. If you could do a 3-word answer, that'd be great.
Well, I actually think that, the trick is that it's actually the same answer, regardless of whether you're going for the cash or going for what you want to do. And it's that you need to understand the process of what you're doing. And I don't care what that is. It's, in terms of the process of photography and videography, it could be the process of anything. It could be engineering, architecture. It's just, you need to understand the process of your industry and understand how to communicate, how to get from point A to point B. And what that means is, pick something, pick something that you're okay taking a creative risk on, and own it. Because, if you want to, level up with, your salary, if you want to get a full-time job, you need to be someone that owns that stuff. And if you want to be someone that wants to do something with people that don't have a lot of money, then you're going to have to also carry a lot too. So you need to understand the value of just focusing on the process and getting things done. And I think that, like, really, if you're graduating college right now, what that would mean is like, just, make sure that you're trying to get into professional environments, get on set, but just make sure that you're really focusing on, the process, and sense, so video, if you're going to shoot video, go to set, bring, your behind the scenes video stuff and just shoot, even if it doesn't get used. The point is that you're trying to be deliberate about what you're doing, and you're trying to think, like, hey, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to provide value in this way. And when you do that long enough, then you get the luxury of, when you show up, you can kind of just, it will naturally happen. But when you're starting off, you kind of have to be proactive about that. And you have to really, kind of figure out where you're going to be in the ways that you'll, fill the gaps, so to speak.
It's interesting that you say that. And I wanted us to stop at 20 minutes, but I think we're going to have to stop at 30. As I was preparing for this conversation and trying to think of essentially my lead in, and I wanted to talk, I ended up wanting to tell the podcast story about my first podcast and getting to hear. But I was thinking, as I'm analyzing my business and doing these things, which I do every year, every 2 years, I do some sort of introspective look at what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. I think one of the weaknesses that I didn't work for anyone before I started this. Video had only been a hobby. I had made videos, and then like I made videos for CNN when I was doing like marketing events there, where like we were out handing out T-shirts, and I also recorded interviews. Like I had no formal training in it or
Yeah.
anything, and then it was that line which sort of
Mm-hmm.
I could say to people when I started my company, like, yeah, I used to edit video for CNN. I did. I
Exactly.
did. I
Yeah.
edited things that
Yeah.
went on the channel occasionally. But because of that, as I've grown on the business side of things, like I didn't know about what insurance I needed. I didn't know
Yeah.
what liability. I didn't know about invoicing and taxes. Like there's so much that I didn't know. But I think that's obvious, those business things. What I was missing on the other hand was the process of things. And when I shot with you guys for the first time, that Kickstarter video, I was so like I forgot. I think Dane asked. He's like, "Hey, will you hand me that pony?"
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I had to go to someone who's been so patient with me over the years. I went to David and I'm like, "What's what's
What's a
a
pony?
pony?" And it was like that exposure to the language just blew my mind, and I felt so annoying because I felt like I wasn't useful. And they'd be like, "Hey, hand me that C stand." I'm like, what's a C stand? And like,
Yeah.
and you've
Yeah.
got to learn all that stuff once. You've got to learn it the first time. Everyone, I mean, everything you learn, you have to learn the first time. And I think what you're saying about like, get involved, go to these sets, be a fly on the wall,
Yeah.
participate where you can, but absorb. I think if I had, I was about to say if I had the opportunity, I didn't make the opportunity. If I had done that in some way, and the times now where I have worked with bigger agencies and like the stuff I did with Paradowski, where we've got a crew of 8, I'm hearing things. I'm talking like the first time I used a smart slate was in 2019. These are late in
Yeah.
life things that are just the standard for a lot of people. But yeah, you don't know what you don't know until you go out and see it, and you can learn so much from people. And I regret that I sort of just bulldozed this path. I'm like, well, I know how to make a video. I'm going to do it my way. And there's a lot that I've learned the hard way or learned really late. And I think if I
Yes.
had, like you're saying, if I had come
So
in and gotten some exposure to the process and paid attention to the process before I got in as deep, I would be in a, not that I would be in a different place right now, but my journey here would have been a little easier.
Well, I got to say, this is definitely not something that I should introduce at the minute 27 or whatever we are here. But I think that there's something that's really happening in, film and video culture right now. And I think everybody, it's kind of been on the tip of our tongue in the sense of, so if you're going on set, there are two types of people. There are film people, and there are like YouTube people. You know what I'm talking about? And there really
Don't
are
get me
two.
started on YouTube people.
Yeah, well, hey, but everybody's got their own opinions. You really do come to it
Yeah,
from two
no.
different places. And now really consider what that is. Like a person like David. You mentioned David. David's very, golden era of Hollywood kind of person. I shouldn't even say that, but he's more of that kind of style, 70s and everything. He likes that.
He prefers shooting with tungsten lights.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah.
That's all you need to say.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he will bring that background and that expertise. And then there's also kind of the more YouTube, the vlog kind of style where they have developed their own process. And so when I talk about process, it's more about communication and more about understanding where you can take real creative risks. Because I think that the real problems that you can have, and, I think I'm not going to call anybody out at all, but I think that, like the most important thing, or sorry, the worst thing that you can do is not do anything. And I don't mean that you should always just be trying to, to break your back to do stuff, but you should at least try to be focused on doing something, and really, and what that will do is teach you how to be a good person on set, a good worker, and get things done. Because every artist, every successful businessman will tell you that it's not necessarily about the perfection of the art. It's about the consistency of the process, and it's about doing, making good decisions, over and over again. And what that means for a creative person in this field is that you got to be a good communicator. You got to be good to work with on set, because that's the truth of the matter. That's where you're going to get the best work, is when you're, having a good time. And you got to get the shit done, of course.
Yeah.
So
That's the second time you've sworn on this live stream. I'm gonna have to go mute those. This is a
Oh my God, I'm
kid-friendly
so
channel.
sorry. I'm
Yeah,
so sorry. Is that true?
it is.
Oh
It
my
is.
goodness. You know,
Um,
that's something that we should have discussed beforehand, honestly,
I
because I could have
typically,
just gone for it.
yeah, I know, and I appreciate your restraint.
Yeah, yeah.
But the last thing I'll say after what you just said, with regard to like picking up a process, I think you could come in and copy anyone's process. You could go to a
Mhm.
Hollywood film set, you could watch David work, and you could try to be David, but you're not going to be, and that might not be right for you. And at the same time, you could watch a YouTuber do
Mhm.
it with their
Yep.
shortcuts and whatever, and they'll tell you, oh, a shower curtain will be just as good as a 4x4 floppy or whatever. And they're going to get results that work for them. But by getting exposure to as many of those different processes, you can build your own in a way that you're comfortable with and you can learn. And I think there's a lot of us that are in this sort of walking between the two worlds, like Nicolas Cage and Ghost Rider, that we can we can do some of the old school stuff and some of the tricks from the YouTube generation and combine those things in a way to produce video really efficiently, where to bring in an old Hollywood crew to shoot your commercial is going to cost $100,000, where with a few corners cut with some ways that we know how and some technology that we have at our disposal, we can do it for a quarter of the cost.
Yeah.
And it would take a doctor to notice it would take a Hollywood person to notice the difference. And
Do you mind if I go on that just for a second?
do it.
Okay, because I gotta say, I think one of the biggest things, and we talked about or I said, the convergence of the film and YouTube kind of thing. I think the most important thing that we can learn from that is that at the end of the day, things have to get done. Like, I keep on saying that, but one of the things that happens a lot of times in the film world is we get caught in the loop of perfection and trying to get everything to this 100%. Like this shot, if we just put another 90 minutes into it, it would be perfect. But at the end of the day, is 85% going to be what and honestly, it's like, I think that there's a real kind of like fear in talking that way, because we want to think of ourselves as, like this artist that creates this thing. And I'm not trying to diminish that, because that is what we do, but at the end of the day, every one of us is motivated by getting the job done. And so what that means is that when you go on site, you have to understand that unless you're just in the magical space, it's not going to be the 100%. So maybe using that shower curtain instead of the floppy, like if that saves you enough money to get this other thing, that's really important. And I, just edited a film shot on exclusively A7S2s.
I know, I shot behind the scenes photos and I learned a
Yeah,
ton from being on set
there you go.
those few days. And
Yeah.
I mean, that was your exact example. Go to a film set and shoot behind the scenes stuff. That's exactly what I did with that. Yeah. The last thing, if I were to ask myself the last question I asked you, like what advice would I give? You tiptoed on it a minute ago. When you need experience, you need to be doing things and working towards something. I have problems with like hustle culture, and that's not what we're not talking about grinding, but what makes somebody good at the creative industry, especially video production, more than anything else, is the ability to solve problems. Because that is 80% of our job, is showing up and being like, oh, well, there's a big old
100%.
window here. Oh, there's a giant air conditioner that we can't turn off. How do we do this? And we get good by doing this for years. And it's like, well, actually, when we've got a window like this, we know, like there's stuff we don't even think about anymore, because you walk into a room and it's like, well, if that's there, then we'll go here. And it's not even a problem. It's just part of the process. And that's what becomes so valuable when I'm looking at hiring people and contractors and stuff that I can trust. I know there's young people out there with cameras that could shoot stuff. My concern is I put you in a room with my client and a request gets thrown out and you've just never dealt with it before.
Yep.
And I want to know that even if you don't know how to solve that particular problem, you know how to approach problem solving
Yes.
in a level-headed, calm way. And I loved what you said about if we're all having fun, we're going to do better work. And that is something I'm realizing more and more when I do bad work. When I look back at a project that I didn't like, it's because I'm rushed. And when I'm rushed, I'm not relaxed and I lose focus on directing. and I lose focus on what the story is, and I'm getting distracted by technical things. And if instead I kept my head or had a crew around me that was working on solving those problems so we can keep the ship headed in the right direction, everything is better. But that just comes from composure and experience.
Well, and the real secret here is that improvisation occurs in the same place in the brain in every field. So if we're talking about Miles Davis, obviously incredible, like jazz, improviser, that is occurring in the same spot as any other person improvising in their field. Now, I'm not saying that they're equal levels of genius, but what I am saying is that when we're talking about problem solving and improvising, it's something that actually a person brings to the table. It's not just like kind of a random skill, it's like, this is, like if you surely know someone who's really good at just entering a situation and just, finding, the space and just being like, I'm going to figure this out. That is a skill. It really is. The Miles Davis.
Your words. That's what you wanted.
I thank you. That was an amazing compliment.
I'm gonna finish our conversation with a topical thing. The Matrix movies came out.
Oh my goodness.
The new Matrix came out. I haven't seen it yet. I'm excited to see it.
I haven't either.
But speaking of jazz, my high school saxophone instructor, a guy named Nick Stark, amazing educator and an amazing saxophone player, and a good friend. He said to me, like when he was talking about jazz musicians, he talked about the Matrix because this was in the early 2000s. And he was like, you've got people who are operators who can sort of look at all the cascading green characters and say, that's a car, that's a plane, that's like, they can see it. And then you look at somebody like John Coltrane or Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker, these amazing improvisers, and to them, that's Neo. That's when you don't see the green anymore. You just feel it. You feel the chord changes. You're improvising in harmony with the context. And I loved that image of it's not about trying to like quickly calculate and do something. It's about when it becomes natural, when you just start to feel those situations. And so if I can hire Neo and Miles Davis to be on my video crew, I think that's going to be the Boom Dream Team.
Well, the thing that combines Neo and Miles Davis is that both of them have zero fear because they know that they're just in a world of their own creation. And that's for real.
Well, I mean, Neo's afraid of not saving the world or his true love. That's like what the whole thing's about.
God,
but I get your point. I
just absolutely killed that line, and then you come through and bulldoze it like that. How dare
Ergo
you?
vis-a-vis, I'm going architect on you.
Oh my god!
Bret, thanks for hanging
great.
out and sharing your life with me.
No, this is good. I mean, I'm honestly surprised that it took us literally to 2022 for this to happen.
Yeah, we should do this again. I'm to all the viewer watching right now. I've been streaming every Tuesday night at 8:30 Central, and I intend to keep that going as long as I possibly can. And I'm learning a ton just about presentation and public speaking and stuff, different than the recorded videos I do. But it's also been an excuse to try playing music live and to have conversations that I wouldn't necessarily get to have otherwise. So I'm excited for 2022 to see what other conversations like this we can force ourselves to have. And when you have a conversation live streaming to the world, even if there's not a huge audience,
only 1 million or 2.
Yeah, it changes the conversation in an interesting way. And I think if you and I were standing outside of one of our houses or something, it would have been a different conversation. And there's something cool about an audience that keeps us focused in some sort of way. So thanks for being vulnerable, for sharing your knowledge. Yeah. And thanks for watching, everyone who watches. Have a wonderful night, everybody.